You're insane. You're insane. You're insane. You're insane. No way. Dangerous people are teaching your kids. Okay. So I'm choosing to watch this video because, as you guys know, I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher for at least at this point, oh my God, since I was, what, 15, 16? So going on 12 years now. While I don't make that great a sum from the teachings that I do make enough to feel like I can make an impact while not worrying about where I live. I am currently not a teacher anymore, so goddamn, that sucks. But regardless of that, holy fuck, I need to see this because it concerns our frogger faced friend Jordan Peterson doing some narration. And I gotta see. I gotta see what the fuck he's talking about because I feel like, nope, you're not getting away from me. You're not getting away from me. But yo, that last one is absolutely delusional. That's literally telling people everything is calm, calm down. We're the rational ones. We know what we're talking about. Don't worry, the earth is not burning. There are no issues, even though we had a bunch of wildfires this year that were unsubstantially greater than any wildfires we've ever seen in almost human history. Don't worry, guys. It's just a few activists. It's just a few people trying to play the system so Big Green can get money. It's all a big stunt so they can get the money so they can enact their new world order all over us and make us use clean energy and actually be technologically efficient with our electricity use. It's fear mongering to tell people nothing's going on and they're making you. Those are the crazy guys. Those are the guys who are insane. Oh my God, socialism. That's what that video sounds like. Socialism. Like, oh my God. Are you serious?
You may not realize it, but you are currently funding some dangerous people. They are indoctrinating young minds throughout the West with their resentment-ridden ideology. They have made it their life's mission to undermine Western civilization itself, which they regard as corrupt, oppressive, and patriarchal.
Wrong. Western civilization wasn't always like that. I mean, it was, but not. It depends on what type of West civilization you're talking about. Because, excuse me, American colonialism and imperialism has definitely impeded our way of thinking about how we think about the world in terms of economics, socials, and even emotional states of the human beings that actually live in it. Because we're constantly driven by a money-centric system of consumerism in which the things that we don't have make us feel like we're worse off, which leads us into a cycle of thinking that we can't get out of it because we understand that money is a finite resource that can't be found everywhere, as opposed to the rich people who live in a society who know that money can be found by exploiting the labor of the working class and exploiting the mere system put in place to be able to allow them to get away with things like murders, tax evasion, big law changes because they have the lawyers to be able to fight it and they understand the law to a degree where they can bend the rules in their favor, and therefore if you do not make people aware of that, they will continue to be a slave to the system that they're inside of because they don't even understand how they're getting wrapped up in the situations that they're getting wrapped up in that cause them to feel this way and that cause them to lose out on the ability to even think about creating a higher value for the labor that they produce. Boom, baby. That's how you do the Ben Shapiro. That's how you do the rapid talk. Boom, baby. We out here. We out here. We out here.
If you're a taxpayer or paying for your kid's liberal arts degree, you're underwriting this gang of nihilists.
Wrong again. You're assuming that kids even, like, you're assuming that colleges, you're assuming that schools are left-leaning because, okay, watch this. You're assuming that for all schools. I'm sure you're going to make a case for specific places, but you're assuming that for all schools, which means that all schools have to have some type of way to even begin promoting this type of ideology to children. And how would you do that? How would you even get there if you're taking a math class? If you're going to talk about money and all of a sudden get into a philosophical debate, that's not true. If you're talking about college and you're in a music class, the music teacher professors don't even have time to even begin talking to you about the world because of the way their curriculum is structured. That doesn't even give them the breathing room to begin to talk about these things. So you're either lying about half, if not most, because liberal arts degrees are general education classes, and the worst that you'll get is a left leaning teacher in economics or philosophy. But if you're talking about all across the board, then you're really concerning yourself with the idea that people are still being paid to teach for liberal arts degrees that aren't even related to the field in which they could bring this topic up. So you're either lying about that or you're lying about it all. I'm going to even give you the benefit of doubt and just make a judgment assumption from here. You're lying about that.
You're supporting ideologues who claim that all truth is subjective, that all sex differences are socially constructed, and that Western imperialism is the sole source of all third world problems. They are the postmodernists, pushing progressive activism at a college near you. They produce the mobs that violently shut down campus speakers, the language police who enshrine into law use of fabricated gender pronouns, and the dean
Enshrine into law, because pronouns are a thing we don't use anymore. We don't refer to a person we don't know as he or she. We can't just say they. Apparently that doesn't exist anymore. And it's too much for you to be able to say, hey, call me by this, but you'll willingly call them by their nickname if they have one. Like, I'm confused here.
whose livelihoods depend on madly rooting out discrimination, where little or none exists. Their thinking took hold in Western universities in the 60s and 70s, when the true believers of the radical left became the professors of today.
That's not true at all either.
And now we rack up education-related debt, not so that our children learn to think critically, write clearly, or speak properly, but so they can model their mentor's destructive agenda.
Wrong again, because my speech teacher had no agenda and he taught me how to speak clearly. Wrong again, because my music with about writing class taught me how to analyze pieces of music, but let alone in that writing about music class, I learned that not every essay has to attend to the same structure as something you're writing formally about a topic. If you're writing about a music dissertation, you write in a different style. You write with different adjectives, different verbs. You describe things in a way that is attained specifically to the field inside of the thing that you're writing, as opposed to writing a general great essay with sources cited, formatting, blah, 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 this, blah, 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 that. That all happens. You're learning how to write clearly because you most likely will take some form of FICWIS class. And by FIC, I think it's freshman inquiry writings. You will have to write a big essay. You will have to learn how to be able to discuss things in expanded form without sounding boring or droning on or repeating the same points. You'll learn how to reinforce how you talk about things so that way you're coming from multiple angles to be able to discuss both points and counterpoints to your logic and your pathos. You do not get a liberal standing from that. The liberal point of how we get, or the reason why this turns more people liberal, is because when you start discussing these things in a more nuanced way where you have to spend hours and hours and hours doing the research, gathering the resources to be able to tell a story about your point of view in a way that sounds well constructed and well put together, is if you absorb all the talking points from left and right of your center point of view. I don't mean literally sitting in the center. I mean, if you didn't know anything, you don't gain an opinion until you get that research. Therefore, when you start finding out more and more stories about different people, different backgrounds, different things, you're generally understanding that there's an abuse of the working class by the upper class. And when you immediately start to understand that, it leads you to look for more ideologies that align with how can you better the experience of life for people living under this system, which are generally found in the liberal areas. In other words, the country has to swing the pendulum back to a different direction because there are too many people who are going without that don't need to. Therefore, there can only be one side of this argument that's pushing that forward, and it has to be the liberal side, because the conservative side is what's keeping us inside of that perpetual system of worrying about this, that, and the other. I feel like every subject is about every subject, but here we are.
It's now possible to complete an English degree and never encounter Shakespeare. One of those
That's not true.
dead white males whose works underlie our society of oppression.
That's not true. That could be like one or two classes, but that's not true. That's not true. As a matter of fact, going through high school, you have to run into Shakespeare, and you should be able to understand his text by then, or at least the way he writes. I had to deal with Shakespeare in theater class as part of my electives that were necessary for the major that I was in. I'm sorry, that's a lie. That was a suggested course for people in my field of liberal arts. So that's not true either. I don't know how you would get there, but even then, Shakespeare still writes in a dead language and a dead way of expressing one's beliefs. And you could absolutely teach a modern class based on nothing about Shakespeare and still be able to fully grasp what's going on if you just look at other artists from that time who were of different descent that were white. But that has nothing to do with the point.
To understand and oppose the postmodernists, the ideas by which they orient themselves must be clearly identified. First is their new unholy trinity of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity is defined not by opinion, but by race, ethnicity, or sexual identity.
That's not true either. That's not true either. Because what you're saying is that diversity is attached to opinion. That's diversity of ideals. That's different than race, ethnicity, and sexual identity. And you can put difference of ideals under that. But then when you start to speak on these things, if you say certain people shouldn't have this, or that, then it makes you feel like you're an authority speaking on behalf of another authority. To which I will say, how do you attain these ideals? And if you say something like God or just the way that it is, then you can speak back and say, well, that was that way because this king back in 1030 said that, and we kind of just carried on with it because the ruling class was never going to change it. So more and more people got born into it. Therefore, there wasn't really a need to adapt to change that, even though people still thought it was needed to change, which is how we ended up with America in the first place. The idea that the systems that were in place weren't working for us. We are definitely not the America of old, and that's strange that people think that we still are. I don't know how people think that, but yeah, we're here. We're here.
Equity is no longer the laudable goal of equality of opportunity, but the insistence on equality of outcome. And inclusion is the use of identity-based quotas to attain this misconceived state of equity. All the classic rights of the West are to be considered secondary to these new values. Take, for example, freedom of speech, the very pillar of democracy.
No, it's not. No, it's not. Freedom of speech means, I know you know this already, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Freedom of speech is about the government's ability to retaliate against you for speaking out against them. Freedom of speech has jack shit to do with the way society runs itself autonomously. If at some point in time, like before, the N-word is deemed by society to be pushing too far into the... Does it smell in here? I went to the bathroom. Oh. Oh, caught my whole stream off. Sorry, guys. I was like, what?
The postmodernists...
Sorry, guys. So yeah, destabilization of like the idea that your ideals are just not what society deems necessary at this time. So freedom of speech, you can say the N-word, but there will be massive consequences if you do so. Does that mean you can't say that word? No, you absolutely can. Just people won't tolerate it to a certain point. The word's not getting locked out. Like, it's not like Voldemort, and it's not like the word saying the word Voldemort and then the trackers find you. It's not that. It's people deeming that society has progressed past the need for these ideals or these forms of speech. Now, if you start saying hateful rhetoric, you start saying Nazi shit, we're obviously going to be like, well, you have the right to say it, but my country defeated the Nazis, so therefore I don't buy into the idea that we're even strong enough because we felt like we needed to do that in the first place. That's an obvious like thing. But even then, people are still waving Nazi flags in America, and no one's saying anything about that on an empirical sense. Nobody seems to care that that's still an ideology that lived on well past that because we think, oh, it's so infinitesimally, fuck. It's really small. It's really fucking small. Therefore, we're like, no. And no. No. It's not enough for us to care. But the fucking Nazi Socialist Party was like a few hundred dudes at the time. And that worked. Like, these are people who aren't going to wave it in public, but they'll be on the chat rooms. If that ideology exists, think 6 degrees of separation. Automatically, that's a widespread thing the moment you get there. So no, that's not true. There's no attack on freedom of speech. We're just sharpening our consequences for a lot of things that don't make sense to us. I'm sorry that I don't want to call Spanish people a racist slur. I'm sorry that I don't want to think about black people as anything less. And I'm going to tell you to your face, yo, what you're saying right now ain't really helping nobody. So I really don't know what you're saying. And I don't get why you have to say it that way or even begin to even process a thought like that. You can go and say that with your homies, which is what you probably do, and you don't get laughed about it. But when you come over here with that, we're not tolerating it. You still have the ability to share that with your group of friends, your group of people, your group of whatever. Just know that when you get out into the larger picture, there are more people out there who are going to be like, no, you forget you. Like,
refuse to believe that people of goodwill can exchange ideas and reach consensus. Their world is instead a Hobbesian nightmare of identity groups warring for power. They don't see ideas that run contrary to their ideology as simply incorrect. They see them as integral to the oppressive system they wish to supplant.
Again, two things wrong. You're attaching a large meaning to a small matter, and you're attaching, sorry, I just had this in my head. You're attaching a large meaning to a small group, and again, you're using hyperbole to attack a point that's not happening. This is not happening. This right here is not happening.
Their ideology as simply incorrect. They see them as integral to the oppressive system they wish to supplant.
Because the language that you use perpetuates an idea. The idea eventually reaches a large enough group of people where if they feel like it works for them, then they won't care about changing it. Therefore, the language that you use becomes a part of the system that has allowed the imbalance of power to exist since the beginning. I don't know how you don't get that. I really don't know how you don't get that. And you try to tell me that you do get that, and somehow we're still here, still talking about it. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Like, you can't be serious. You can't even remotely tell me that this is real. Like, are you fucking kidding me?
And consider it a moral obligation to stifle and constrain their expression. Second is rejection of the free market, of the very idea that free voluntary trading benefits everyone. They won't acknowledge that capitalism has lifted up hundreds of millions of...
Oh, God, the fucking capital. I saw it coming, and I was going to pause it beforehand, and I was like, nah, let me not be like that. Let me really hear dude out. Maybe he got something to say. But, oh, man, he came with the fucking myth. Came with the myth. Man came ready. I'm dropping down, brothers. I'm down bad. Bro. I'm down so bad. I'm down here. I'm down bad, bro. I'm down so bad. Oh, my God. You can't be serious. You can't say this with a straight face, homie. I'm sorry. You're not allowed to. You can't have these opinions with a straight face. Because you'd have to be admitting way too much shit at the same time as like denying it for this to even be like remotely a valid thing to talk about. Like, no way. I can't believe it. No way, son.
people, so they can, for the first time in history, afford food, shelter, clothing, transportation, even entertainment and travel. Those classified as poor in the U.S. and increasingly everywhere else are able to meet their basic needs. Meanwhile, in once prosperous Venezuela, until recently the poster child of the campus radicals, the middle class lines up for toilet paper. Third and finally are the politics of identity.
Time. If you meet a conservative that says something about Venezuela, shoot him in the leg, because that's effectively what they're trying to do to you. Just shoot him in the leg. Like, don't even bring up Venezuela every time. Like, but what about Venezuela? Like, that's like a catchphrase now. Put it on a t-shirt. But Venezuela, you sell millions. I just gave grifters a whole big platform to sell something brand new. You could really get into the tiresome arguments about how many times Venezuela has been brought up as a functional, like, and you see how he skipped the word communism, right? And talked about the radicals applying big thought to small ideas because it's easier to use hyperbole so that way your argument can't get attacked from an angle that allows you to even begin to dissect what your reasoning was. And it gets me so pissed off because it's so easy to see through that, but people buy into this logic hard. People buy into it so fucking hard that they make an identity based off of it. And when you try to tell them, hey, I don't think that what you're really saying right now actually holds any value or merit when it comes about talking about humanity and being able to move forward in 5,000, 10,000 years, they're not ready for that. They don't want to dissect this deeper than what that was.
Postmodernists don't believe in individuals. You're an exemplar of your race, sex, or sexual preference.
Wrong again. Those three things make up who you are as an individual, and you should represent those things as proudly as possible. He's talking about the fact that we don't like white men. Like that's you're not even clever enough to hide that, bro.
You're also either a victim or an oppressor. No wrong can be done by anyone in the former group, and no good by the latter. Such ideas of victimization do nothing but justify the use of power and engender intergroup conflict. All these concepts originated with Karl Marx, the 19th century German philosopher. Marx viewed the world as a gigantic class struggle, the bourgeoisie against the proletariat, the grasping rich against the desperate poor. But wherever his ideas were put into practice, in the Soviet Union, China, Vietnam, and Cambodia, to name just a few, whole economies failed and tens of millions were killed. We fought a decades-long Cold War to stop the spread of those murderous notions. But they're back in the new guise of identity politics. The corrupt ideas of the postmodern neo-Marxists should be consigned to the dustbin of history. Instead, we underwrite their continuance in the very institutions where the central ideas of the West should be transmitted across the generations. Unless we stop. Postmodernism.
I can't do it anymore. He's full of shit. That's the end of the segment. He's full of shit. All of that is stupid. He's full of shit. He's fucking full of shit.